Two legends. One room. One question. When Frank Sinatra questioned whether John Wayne could live with his conscience, Wayne's silent answer changed everything. The door closed. The room went quiet. And two men who had known each other for 30 years faced each other across a distance that had nothing to do with the space between them. It was March 1974. A small dressing room at Paramount Studios. Wood-paneled walls. A desk lamp throwing warm light across worn furniture. Two glasses of whiskey on the table, either one touched. An ashtray with a cigarette burning down to ash, forgotten. Frank Sinatra stood near the window, Venetian blinds closed against the California afternoon. He was 58 years old, still sharp in an expensive dark suit, still carrying himself with that coiled energy that had defined his presence for decades. John Wayne sat in a wooden chair by the table. 66 years old. Heavier than he'd been in his cowboy days. Slower. The cancer that would kill him in 5 years was already there, though only a few people knew. He wore a dark western shirt, his weathered hands resting on his knees. They'd been talking for 20 minutes. About a charity event. About mutual friends. About the business. Small talk between old acquaintances who'd moved in the same Hollywood circles since the 1940s. And then Sinatra asked the question. "Duke," Frank said, using Wayne's nickname, "I've always wondered something. How do you live with it?" Wayne looked up slowly. "Live with what?" "The war. You didn't go. Every other guy we knew, Jimmy Stewart, Clark Gable, hell, even I tried to enlist, but you stayed home making movies. How do you carry that?" The room changed. The air itself seemed to grow heavier. Wayne didn't raise his voice. He didn't move. He simply looked at Frank Sinatra with those steady blue eyes that had stared down 1,000 movie villains and said nothing. Wayne didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. To understand what happened next, you need to understand what Frank Sinatra didn't know. What almost no one knew. What Wayne had carried alone for 32 years. December 1941. Pearl Harbor. America entered World War II and Hollywood emptied out as actors rushed to enlist. James Stewart joined the Army Air Corps. Clark Gable became a gunner. Henry Fonda served in the Navy. Even directors like John Ford went to war. John Wayne was 34 years old. At the height of his career. The quintessential American hero on screen, the cowboy, the soldier, the man who always did the right thing. He wanted to enlist. God, how he wanted to enlist. But Republic Pictures had him under contract. The studio head, Herbert Yates, told Wayne plainly, "You're worth more to the war effort making movies. Morale pictures. Keep America believing we can win." Wayne argued. He pushed. He contacted recruiters. He was ready to walk away from his contract, from his career, from everything. Then his wife Josephine told him she was pregnant with their 4th child. Their marriage was already failing, they'd divorced 2 years later, but she was scared. The world was at war. She needed him home. Wayne's own father, Clyde Morrison, a veteran of the Spanish-American War, pulled him aside. "Son," Clyde said, his hands shaking with age and illness, "I got maybe a year left. Maybe less. Stay. Let your brothers go. Someone needs to be here." Wayne had 3 younger brothers. All 3 enlisted. All 3 served. All 3 came home. But John Wayne stayed. He made war movies. He played heroes. He inspired millions. And every single day, he carried the weight of not being there when it mattered most. In 1945, when his brothers came home, Wayne threw them a party. His youngest brother, Robert, had been wounded at Iwo Jima. When Robert walked into the house in his uniform, still limping, Wayne embraced him and said quietly, "I should have been there with you." Robert pulled back, looked his famous brother in the eye, and said something Wayne would never forget. "You were there, Duke. Every guy in my unit had your movies in their heads. You made us believe we were the good guys. That mattered. But it didn't heal the wound. Nothing could. For 30 years, Wayne lived with it. The knowledge that when America needed him most, he'd stayed in Hollywood. He never talked about it publicly. Never explained. Never defended himself. He just carried it. Silent. Alone. He threw himself into supporting veterans. He visited hospitals. He raised money. He made more war movies, trying to honor the men who'd actually fought. He played soldiers with a reverence that other actors didn't understand. But the guilt never left. And now, in March 1974, in a small dressing room at Paramount Studios, Frank Sinatra, who had been classified 4F and rejected from service for a punctured eardrum, was asking John Wayne how he lived with not going to war. Wayne stood up slowly. His knees hurt. His back hurt. Everything hurt. But he stood. On the table between them, catching the lamplight, was a Purple Heart medal. It had been there the whole time, either man acknowledging it. It had belonged to Wayne's brother Robert. Robert had given it to Duke years ago, and Wayne carried it. Not for show. Just carried it. Wayne picked up the medal. Held it in his weathered hand. "Frank," Wayne said, his voice quiet, controlled. "You want to know how I live with it?" Sinatra didn't answer. Something in Wayne's tone made him stay quiet. "I don't," Wayne said simply. "I wake up every morning and I don't. I make another movie and I don't. I shake hands with veterans and look them in the eye and I don't." He set the Purple Heart back on the table, carefully, like it was made of glass. "My brother gave me this. He got it on Iwo Jima. 22 years old, took shrapnel in his leg saving 2 guys from his unit. He came home and gave this to me. Said I earned it more than he did, making movies that kept them sane. I told him that was horseshit. He said maybe. But you carry it anyway." Wayne looked at Sinatra directly now. "So that's how I live with it, Frank. I don't. I just carry it. Same way I carry everything else I got wrong. Same way we all do. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most important part of this story is still unfolding." The silence in the room was absolute. Outside, the studio bustled with activity. Inside, 2 men faced each other across 30 years of friendship and the sudden realization that they'd never really known each other at all. Sinatra's face had changed. The aggressive certainty was gone, replaced by something else. Confusion. Maybe regret. "I didn't know about your brother," Frank said quietly. "You didn't ask," Wayne replied. Not angry. Just factual. "Duke, Frank." Wayne's voice cut through. Still quiet. Still controlled. "You're a good man. You've done a lot of good. But you don't get to question another man's conscience unless you've carried his weight. You haven't carried mine. You don't know what I live with." Wayne moved toward the door. Slow. Deliberate. Each step measured. "Duke, wait." Wayne stopped at the door. His hand on the knob. He didn't turn around. "You asked how I live with it," Wayne said to the door, to the room, to the 30 years of unspoken things between them. "The answer is I don't live with it. It lives with me. Every day. Every role. Every handshake with a veteran who thinks I'm a hero. It lives with me." He opened the door. "But I'll tell you what I don't do, Frank. I don't question other men's pain. I don't measure their guilt against mine. And I don't pretend I know what they carry just because I know their name." Wayne walked out. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Frank Sinatra stood alone in the dressing room, staring at the Purple Heart medal on the table, the 2 untouched glasses of whiskey, the cigarette that had burned itself out. Away from the cameras, Wayne made a choice no one expected. They never spoke again. Not at industry events. Not at charity functions. Not even a nod across a crowded room. For the 5 years Wayne had left, through his final films, through his cancer diagnosis, through his Oscar win for True Grit, he and Sinatra moved in the same Hollywood circles without ever occupying the same space. People noticed. Reporters asked. Neither man explained. When Wayne died in June 1979, Sinatra wasn't at the funeral. He sent flowers. No card. Just flowers. Years later, it was 1985, Frank was 70 years old, a journalist asked him about John Wayne. About their friendship. About the falling out. Sinatra, who rarely showed vulnerability, who built his entire persona on unshakable confidence, paused for a long time before answering. "I asked Duke a question I had no right to ask," Frank said finally. "I thought I was being honest. Turned out I was being cruel. There's a difference. Took me losing a friend to learn it." The journalist pressed, "What was the question?" "Doesn't matter," Sinatra said. "What matters is I questioned a man's conscience without knowing what he carried. That's not honesty. That's just arrogance dressed up as truth." He didn't say anything else about it. Ever. But what followed would stay with everyone who witnessed it, forever. The story didn't end in that dressing room. It ended 15 years later, in 1989, when Frank Sinatra was recording what would be one of his final albums. The producer suggested a song. An old ballad about regret, about things left unsaid, about friendships lost to pride. Frank looked at the lyrics and said, "No. Not this one." "Why not?" the producer asked. "It's perfect for your voice now. The gravitas." Frank set the sheet music down. On top of it, he placed something small. The producer leaned closer. It was a photograph. Old. Faded. Two young men on a movie set in the 1940s, arms around each other's shoulders, laughing at something off camera. John Wayne and Frank Sinatra. Before the war. Before the guilt. Before the question. "I can't sing about regret," Frank said quietly, "while I'm still living with it." He never recorded that song. When Sinatra died in 1998, they found the photograph in his wallet. Carried for 44 years. Never shown to anyone. Just carried. In Sinatra's papers, donated to his estate after his death, there was a letter. Unsealed. Addressed to John Wayne in handwriting that had grown shaky with age. It was dated 1978, 1 year before Wayne died, but never sent. It said only this: "Duke, you were right. I didn't know what you carried. I'm sorry I questioned it. I'm sorry I questioned you. Frank." The letter sits now in an archive. Next to it, by request in Sinatra's will, is a Purple Heart medal. Not the one from that dressing room, that stayed with Wayne's family. A different one. One Sinatra had purchased from a military memorabilia dealer in 1975. He'd carried it for 23 years. Never explained why to anyone. But the archivist who catalogued Sinatra's effects found a small note tucked inside the medal's case, in Frank's handwriting. "Carried by men better than me. Carry it to remember. Share and subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered." John Wayne never knew about the letter. Never knew about the medal. Never knew that the question Frank Sinatra asked in 1974 haunted Sinatra until the day he died. But maybe it doesn't matter whether Wayne knew. What matters is what that moment taught. You don't know what another man carries. You don't know the weight of his choices, the burden of his regrets, the quiet battles he fights when no one's watching. John Wayne carried the guilt of not serving for 32 years before Sinatra questioned it, and for 5 years after, until cancer finally relieved him of all earthly burdens. Frank Sinatra carried the guilt of that question for 24 years, until his own death released him from it. Two men. Two kinds of guilt. Both carried in silence. John Wayne died in 1979, still carrying his brother's Purple Heart. Frank Sinatra lived another 19 years, carrying the photograph of a friendship he'd destroyed with one question. The letter Sinatra wrote but never sent was found in his papers after his death. Next to it, a Purple Heart he'd purchased in 1975, not for display, but to carry. To remember. To understand what Wayne had tried to tell him. On the back of the photograph Sinatra kept in his wallet for 44 years, there was a single sentence written in faded ink. Some men carry more than you'll ever see. Share and subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered. Wayne never raised his voice that day in 1974. He didn't have to. He simply walked out of a room and left behind a friendship, a question, and a lesson about the weight of judging another man's conscience. The door closed. Two legends never spoke again. But the silence between them said everything about honor, regret, and the burdens we carry alone. Real strength isn't loud. It's carrying your weight without asking for credit, or offering explanations to those who wouldn't understand anyway.